Have you ever wondered why some women just can't stop thinking about certain men, even when they don't make any effort? No, it's not luck, it's not appearance, and it's definitely not money. What these men know, and what 99% of others ignore, is how to trigger triggers deep within the female mind. Triggers that awaken curiosity, desire, and a kind of emotional connection that she can't explain, but feels. That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. She may not admit it, but there are subtle words, phrases, and attitudes that make her think about you all day long. And the most powerful thing about all this, they are anchored in feminine psychology applied to attraction and relationships. If you are a man who is tired of being ignored, rejected, or forgotten, this video could be the turning point in your way of conquering her. Because here, you will learn to understand her emotions with surgical precision and act in a strategic, intelligent, and irresistible way. The female mind is like an emotional labyrinth, and while most men try to force their way out in a hurry, the few who master the right emotional language, they can enter, move around, and leave their mark forever. And we're not talking about manipulation. We're talking about perception, reading the signals she doesn't say, using words that aren't common, but that awaken feelings she can't explain. Imagine being able to talk to a woman and effortlessly plant the seed of a continuing thought. Imagine being remembered among thousands without having to be present. It is possible, and it starts with the way you communicate with her, with the words you choose, with the gestures you make, with the right time to speak, and the right silence to provoke. Today, you will discover the psychological elements that make the ideal woman think about you 24 hours a day. Let's explore the triggers of scarcity, validation, anticipation, and mystery. Let's dive into the strategies that emotionally intelligent men use to turn the tide of seduction, and the best, in a subtle, almost invisible way. Because when you understand female psychology without a filter, if you knew exactly what triggers a woman's repetitive thoughts, would you still let her forget you? Most men believe that constant presence is what wins, but in truth, it is the strategic absence that stands out. When you master the right psychological triggers, you don't need to insist. You plant ideas in her mind, ideas that grow on their own. The first trigger is scarcity. What is rare is valuable. When you make yourself available all the time, you lose the mystery. Now, when you respond with time, disappear in a calculated way, or show that your attention is selective, you become a powerful doubter. And doubt, for the female mind, is obsession in disguise. Then comes selective validation. And here's the thing, validating what no other person understands. Say something like, "I like the way you think when you're silent." This activates the sense of being seen, and this is addictive, because most men only observe the obvious. The man who perceives the invisible gains emotional space. Now think about the mystery. A message like, "I thought of something that only you would understand, but I'll tell you later." This locks her brain into a silent question that has no immediate answer. And the time she spends thinking about the answer is the time you master the mental space. Anticipation works like a thread, stretched between two moments. Something like, "Tonight, if you remember me, I'll know." It's subtle, but it creates expectation. And expectation is the key to emotional attachment. Contrast, on the other hand, works when you alternate between presence and absence, between warmth and slight coldness. She never knows what to expect, and so she expects everything. The reward trigger comes when, after a strategic absence, you offer something emotional, a memory, a rare compliment, and finally, unpredictability. When you break the pattern of the predictable, like sending a different, provocative message at a moment she doesn't expect, you provoke a genuine emotional response. The secret is not to be direct, it's to be memorable. And these triggers are the shortcuts to that. Comment here if you've already used any of these strategies. Or better yet, write the sentence, "I'm going to use this today," if you feel like everything started to make sense. Her body responds to what you say, if you know how to activate what's behind the desire. And here's the thing, most men talk to women as if they were just an image, a physical presence. But when you speak to the emotional part, to what's behind what she shows, that's when you awaken something that she herself can't explain. A few simple phrases, when said in the right tone, with the right pause, at the right moment, create a physical and emotional reaction that she feels before she even understands it. Phrases that activate the feeling of security, the validation of the invisible, the emotional protection, the exclusivity of being the only one with whom you truly connect. When you say something like, "I like noticing what no one else notices about you," you're not just giving a compliment, you are saying, "I see you." And being truly seen, for the female mind, is the beginning of deep connection. Another phrase that transforms the atmosphere of a conversation is, "There's something about you that makes me curious, but I don't know what." This activates the unpredictability trigger. She feels like there's something to be discovered about her, something you're still trying to decipher. And women fall in love with those who make them feel unique, not those who already think they know everything. When you say, "Don't worry, I notice when you're not feeling well," even when you pretend everything is fine, you are offering emotional protection. This creates a space of trust, a place where she can let her guard down. And desire always arises where there is emotional security. A phrase like, "I don't usually open up like this, but with you it's different," makes her feel like she occupies an exclusive place in your life. And exclusivity breeds attachment. Don't say what everyone says. She doesn't want to hear that she's beautiful. She wants to hear that she is unique in a way no one has realized. If this type of communication made sense to you, comment below which of these phrases you would use most. Or write, "I'm going to test it today," if you are starting to understand how feminine psychology really works. Have you ever stopped to think about why some nicknames stick in her memory and in her heart? It's not by chance. It's not about being creative or funny. It's about accessing, in a subtle way, the emotional areas of the female brain that connect to the feeling of bonding, intimacy, and belonging. Feminine psychology, applied to attraction, shows us that personalized words, especially when they are loaded with emotion and exclusivity, create brands that are much deeper than any real name. The secret is in how you create this nickname. It cannot be generic. It needs to carry an emotional context that only the two of you understand. It needs to be intimate, almost secret. And above all, you need to make her feel that that nickname could never be used with anyone else. For example, think of a situation where you laughed together over something specific. It could have been a detail, a reaction from her, a look. Take this moment and turn it into emotional code. A student of mine did exactly that. He noticed that every time he spoke to her, she would stop what she was doing and start laughing over small things. Then he started calling her my favorite distraction. She laughed the first time, responded the second time, and the third time, she sent a video. After that, every time he used the nickname, she was already emotionally involved before the conversation even started. The nickname became a trigger, an internal button that activated the connection reminder. This type of communication touches the female unconscious because it's not about what is being said, it's about how she feels when she hears it. By using a nickname based on a shared emotional memory, you create a direct access point for affection. It feels like you remember the moment, that you paid attention to something the world would ignore. And this activates the sense of exclusivity, the desire to maintain that bond between you alone. If you've ever used nicknames like this, comment below which one worked best for you. Or write the phrase, "I'm going to create mine now," if that sparks ideas in your mind. I want to see what connections you start to spark with this. When you stop trying to prove yourself, that's when she starts chasing you. It seems contradictory, but this is one of the biggest secrets of emotional seduction. And the reason is simple. Female desire is not born from excessive supply, but from selective presence. The first technique that few men truly understand is strategic detachment. This doesn't mean ignoring or disappearing, but rather showing that you are emotionally centered, that your life remains rich and interesting with or without her presence. The man who is secure in his own absence communicates a silent message. "I am the prize." A student of mine used to always respond to her messages at the same minute. Once he understood this technique, he began to space out his answers elegantly. The result? She started sending longer, more intimate messages and starting conversations more frequently. The second technique is male body language of command. Women don't just connect with what you say, but with the way you move. A man who walks slowly, with a firm posture, and who holds your gaze, exudes confidence, and quiet confidence is extremely seductive. I've seen situations where just the act of a man sitting down with presence caused a woman to change her tone of voice and behavior around him. He didn't say anything. He just occupied the space with emotional confidence. The third technique, perhaps the most powerful, is silence that creates obsession. Well-used silence has more strength than words. When you learn not to react immediately, not to explain everything, to leave empty spaces in a conversation or after a date, these spaces become fertile ground for her imagination. And imagination is where obsession begins. A classic case. A boy who used to justify every absence. After he stopped explaining everything, he noticed that she started to ask more questions, test more, and even open up more. The men who generate lasting attraction are the ones who control the pace of the connection, not the outcome. If you've noticed that explaining yourself too much only drives you away, comment here, "Less is more." Or if any of these techniques made you think differently, write, "Now I understand the game." Let's see who is really ready to turn the game of seduction around. The mouth speaks, but it is the between the lines that create the deepest emotional bonds. And that's exactly what the most strategic men understand. It's not about talking a lot, it's about saying it right. Intelligent conquest begins when you use words that seem simple, but carry a deep emotional charge, capable of activating effective memories, unconscious feelings, and impulses for connection. The female mind is highly receptive to linguistic stimuli that refer to emotion, detail, and the unsaid. Phrases like, "If you only knew what I think when you smile like that," don't give away what you feel, but they open up a space for her to imagine. And in that space, desire is born, because her brain, at that moment, is releasing dopamine, the same neurotransmitter responsible for anticipating pleasure. This type of language is powerful because it simulates the beginning of something intimate, but leaves the door ajar. She doesn't know exactly what you mean, and so she keeps thinking. Another phrase that works with emotional power is, "There's something about your way that I still don't understand, but I like to try." This phrase activates the desire to be understood, but it also creates the feeling of emotional challenge, something that holds. And when she feels like she's being watched in a unique way, something rare happens. Her brain starts releasing oxytocin, the hormone of connection and attachment. These words don't work because they're pretty, but because they access areas of the female unconscious that are associated with memory, emotional reward, and the feeling of being chosen for something beyond the physical. It's as if each phrase becomes a silent code between you. And the more codes of this type you know how to use, the more presence you have in her mind, even in silence, even from a distance. If you've ever noticed that a well-placed phrase completely changes the way a woman responds, comment here, "Right words, right effect," or write, "I'm going to try this today," if any of these phrases awakened something in you. I want to know if you're ready to use language as your main weapon of emotional conquest. You don't have to be handsome, rich, or funny. You need to know how she works and speak to her mind before you speak to her body. That's the difference between an average man and a man who has mastered the applied feminine psychology of attraction and relationships. A woman doesn't give herself up by what she sees. She gives herself up by what she feels. And what she feels is activated by words, actions, and silences that awaken emotion, mystery, and deep connection. Every technique you've seen here, the psychological triggers, the catchphrases, the personalized nicknames, the body language, and the strategic use of silence, all of this forms a system of emotional attraction, a system that acts directly on her subconscious mind and transforms you into someone she can't ignore. While others try to impress with excess, you learn to stand out with intention. And that's why most men fail. They talk too much, they prove too much, they give away too much. But the strategic man, the man who understands her psychology without a filter, says what is necessary, observes more than he says, and creates an emotional experience, a vivid memory that replays in her mind even when you're not around. And now that you understand this, it's time to go further. In the next video, I will show you how a single message can reverse her silence and turn it into desire. A specific phrase which activates the emotional side and makes her take the initiative. You will see how to use absence to your advantage and how to turn the game around with a simple choice of words. If this made sense to you, just imagine what I'm going to reveal next. Click here, continue, because the next step is where the game really changes. And if you've stayed this far, I want to know, which of today's techniques are you going to apply first? Comment, "The game has changed," if you feel like you're now starting to understand how the female mind works, or write, "Ready for part 2," if you're already prepared to become the man she can't forget.